I'd like to talk today about driving successfully agile at scale transformations. And when I say at scale, we're talking about large and medium-sized corporations, because essentially small and startup companies are already functioning in an agile way. But how can bigger companies become more agile? And specifically, what I'll talk about today are two things. One, why? Why is this on the top agenda point of many executives globally? And then a little bit about what it is and what it takes to deliver agility in large corporations. So why agility? This shows, over the last 3 decades, the top 20 most valuable corporations. And what we see is that there is an incredible amount of turnover of these companies on this list, driven by, of course, technology, driven by globalization, and some numbers behind this. If you think back about 100 years ago, the average age of a S&P 500 corporation was expected to be about 90 years. Currently, that number is about 18 years. So this dynamism, this change, is something that keeps executives awake. And one of the things that we've started to come to the conclusion is that this traditional pyramid organization that was developed in the 19th century, really refined and modified by DuPont Chemicals, was a fantastic model in a more stable environment. It had top-down hierarchy, some level of bureaucracy, teams put into functional expertise. It had the leader as the mastermind. But in a very dynamically moving environment, it doesn't work very well. And what many corporations have started to realize is try to emulate what tech companies have done, what small companies are doing, to become more fluid, and are moving towards what we call an agile organization. So that's where you put in end-to-end teams, right, who deliver on a given purpose. The leader's role changes. He's no longer the mastermind, or she the mastermind who sends communication, but leads through creating a vision, enabling the teams to work together. It also can be readjusted and fluidly adjust to the changes on the market and so forth. And when I think about, that's conceptually understandable, but what's kind of the mindset of the two types of organizations? And this is my attempt at discussing that. And I think about a pyramid organization, I think about kind of this traffic signals, right? You've got this very clear rules, you have a centrally managed lighting system, right? You don't really need to think at all. As a driver, you get a clear signal, what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to react. It doesn't trust anybody. And yeah, it's a model that we all are familiar with. In agility, it takes a very different view. It's more like a roundabout. Okay, here, actually, we trust. There's actually one rule. Okay, one rule is there. What happens is there's a lot of trust to the driver that they have to take responsibility for their own safety. It's self-organizing. So in other words, if there's more traffic going one way, it adjusts, right? If you try to adjust the left side, it's, light, how many times, 2 in the morning do we wait at a red light when no one's there, right? On the roundabout, it self-adjusts. It's also cheaper. And think about the left side. If that system breaks down, right, the lights don't stop working, you get complete chaos. And the output is a lot fewer accidents, a lot fewer casualties, and estimated around 40% higher flow that goes through that. And that's essentially the kind of the mind shift between a hierarchical pyramid structure to a more agile and flexible way of working. Now, in today's world, everybody is agile. So I talk to executives globally, and they say, yeah, we're agile. I think a lot of organizations, I think it was some, but I think a lot, don't really understand the concept. So they do Scrum in IT, okay? They do some beanbags, open space, a lot of leadership surveys. Actually, last week I was talking to an executive team who, the executive team, we just climbed Kilimanjaro. We're really a part of, we're together, we're agile. It's nothing to do with that. It's something very different. And when we're talking about agility in larger corporations, it's something that goes very deep and very wide, and in fact affects the whole organization and how it operates and how it works. It is principally around business and IT and bringing those two functions together, okay, and where they have setting the same goals, same KPIs, but also can include any other function within an organization that might be necessary in order to deliver a result. And what we've noticed over the last few years is the real unlock happens when it's not focused on only new development, okay, the new things that are being developed, what I call here change, but also when you include the run part of the organization. Okay, so when those two things come together, you end up getting a huge release of energy and improvements. And the whole process, requires a way then to coordinate, which I'll talk to in a little bit later. Now, we know or may not know, where does this whole concept of agility come from? It started in companies like this, like Netflix and Spotify. It started with an agile manifesto written back in, I think, 2001, where a lot of developers in Silicon Valley were extremely frustrated with how projects were being governed. And based on that philosophy came an operating model, which we now call agility. And these companies showed that, wow, it's a much better way of working, right? It's faster time to market, it's much more efficient, you have less people. By the way, the things that you produce, the software, the solutions you do for customers are better than what was done before, and actually people like it. And to that point, I think the world saw, okay, this is something that's relevant for these types of companies. And then in 2015, what we observed is ING Bank in Holland, okay, in a difficult situation on their market, which applied these agile principles at scale, so across the whole organization, and achieved very similar results. Achieved results like 30% reduction in FTEs and people, achieved much faster time to market, and achieved the the most desired employer in Holland. And the world woke up and said, wow, if that's possible in a bank, could it be possible elsewhere? And their realization was that a bank, like many other institutions, is essentially an IT company. You can't do anything in many companies nowadays without IT. But of course, with things like a regulator, right? With legacy IT systems, with a history of mergers, with branches, right? With what we call control functions like compliance, with legal departments, safety departments, and things like that, and generally older technology. But the model that was developed by these companies like Netflix, Spotify, can actually be very well translated even into that environment that we're talking about. And since 2015, we've just seen an onslaught across the globe of companies, across all sectors, saying, okay, let's start to move in that direction. Now, what is it? Okay, it's, of course, depending on the size of the organization, but it's hundreds of teams. It's very easy to set up what we would call agile islands, okay, little teams that work end-to-end, cross-functionally, delivering on a certain purpose. The trick comes when you move away from individual areas, islands, and move towards creating it for an entire organization. And those teams, hundreds of them, all have a clear mission, understand what they are, They're, like I said, end-to-end, so they can deliver to the customer a certain result. And they're small and usually co-located. But what's required, because if you only do that, you basically end up with complete chaos. Okay? And what's required is what we would call a backbone. Okay? A structure, a backbone which brings that together. Okay? And this is backbone, and I'll talk, is around aligning around the common purposes. It introduces different processes. It touches the whole organization, okay? So the one that goes strictly into agility, but also parts of the organization may not go agile, and then how do those two pieces, the agile, non-agile, interact with each other? What's the process there? It will affect the culture. So I've seen that in multiple situations where whether you like it or not, when this transition is made, culture changes. And that's something that also needs to be guided and orchestrated. A little bit about more about this structure, or say this backbone. We kind of break it down into 4 areas that need to be considered. One is structure. So in other words, you physically rewire the organization, rewire how the company works. You create new roles, which are required. There's a lot about people, right? Training people, getting them prepared for working in a very different way, prepared for working in a non-hierarchical way. A lot of training for executives about how they should interact with these sorts of teams. Processes, I mentioned that. There's things like QBRs, different mechanisms which work. You eliminate things like steering committees and update meetings. Those all go into the trash can. And you create other ways of communicating. And then, last but not least, technology, which enables, especially continuous deployment capabilities for the organization. And that's backbone, which we're talking about. And I also, when thinking about how to kind of visualize this, if you do agility without this backbone, then it's sort of like playing football without any rules, and it's unclear, right? People don't really know what's going on. That's the chaos that I'm talking about. And what we're really talking about is, no, let's set some clear rules, draw some lines, right? Explain the goal, right? What it is. We're trying to score points. We're trying to win the game. Introduce some roles, right? You have a team captain. You have a coach on the side. You have an owner that's maybe sitting up and watching. And so those rules are in place. But what actually happens individually on the pitch, right, is up to those people and their decision to make an adjustment to that or not. Yeah. So thank you.